Welcome to the EcoSend Podcast. Be inspired, educated, and entertained by the world's most ambitious leaders, putting climate at the top of their agenda. Hi there, welcome to another episode of the EcoSend Podcast. I'm your host, James, and I'm thrilled to bring you another episode of the show. For those new to the show, the EcoSend Podcast is a weekly podcast where we speak to other leaders in business who are putting the planet higher on the agenda for themselves and for their customers, for their team. This week, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by Richard, who is the CEO of Webmart, a sustainable marketing agency. Webmart is a responsible business and a certified BCorp, which is awesome. Richard leads a team of 40 strong in marketing execution, strategy, and technology. Webmart partners with clients in e-commerce, retail, and charity, handling £20 million of spend across print, digital, creative, and data services. Richard, I'm so excited to be speaking with you today. How are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Amazing. Thank you, James. Thanks for such a warm intro, and I'm doing very well today. Thank you.
Good stuff. Now, Richard, I know we've spoken a little bit before, and I've been very inspired by your efforts building such a successful agency and all of the incredible things you're doing basically to give back to make the world a little bit better. Before we dive too much into Webmart itself, it might be really good to just understand a little bit more about you and your journey into doing this. So it's always nice to hear about the story that led to the Richard you are today.
Sure. Okay. So I decided to do something slightly different when I came out of school at 18, and I entered into a Young Dragon's Den competition where I managed to make it through to the final two people to present in front of a bunch of investors, basically, at a live event in Milton Keynes in the UK. And on the panel was, as I said, a bunch of investors, and two of which, one was Peter Jones and the other one was Dr. Simon Bilcliffe, who set up Webmart. And happened to be his parent-in-laws live opposite me. So as a kid, I'd see Simon every weekend with his dogs outside, but I never expected to see him on a panel in front of me when I was pitching. I was offered a management traineeship with Simon, and decided to go in that direction with life. And 18 years later, I've been under his wing, learning how to run a responsible business and evolving Webmart to where it is today. And I've had a really good run this far.
That's incredible. So when did you do this competition? So was this like straight out of school or something when you did the Dragon?
Yeah, there was I think it was a local Caltech scheme that had come together with a variety of different partners, including Cranfield Business School. And I think Peter Jones was looking to set up his academy for entrepreneurship at the time. So there was a bit of a pilot concept with 4 masters and MBA students pitching for funding. And then there was 2 under 18s, and I just scraped into the 18 bracket. So unfortunately I couldn't go on the real program, but I could go on the sort of Young Dragon's Den that it was at the time. And that was basically applying to local innovation schemes that came into the school. And next thing, I'd sort of found my love for entrepreneurship and running a business.
That is already incredibly inspiring. So from like pretty early on, you knew like I want to run a business and do something crazy like that.
Yeah, I wanted to be on the other side. I didn't want to be the one presenting. I wanted to be on the other side, sat down, one of the dragons or the angels.
Sit with Peter Jones, yeah.
Yeah. You get a seat. Well, I mean, it's much better than standing up in front of 500 people.
True. I was going to say Peter Jones as well. I don't know about Simon, but Peter Jones is not the easiest of dragons to please, is he? So
I would say, yeah. I mean, they were all equal characters in bringing their style forwards, and it was interesting that I actually, out of all of them, I thought that Simon was actually paying less attention to me, but actually I think he'd heard enough clearly, and was impressed.
Take a chance.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, that's a pretty impressive opener. So from there, you've now running Webmart. But there's also the whole side of Webmart as a B Corp, as a champion for sustainability, for doing marketing that, well, changing the face of marketing in many ways. Like, how, talk me through that side of the journey then. Like, I take it that wasn't something that just one day you woke up and thought, I want to care about that as an agency or as someone running a business.
Yeah, and credit where credit's due. I mean, when I first came across Webmart and making that split decision, I could see that it was a business on a mission. It was a long-term vision that Simon himself has taken a lot of passion in the future of the planet, regenerative
Mm.
business, and finding ways to reduce the impact of, marketing services on the planet. And I think even as early as when I joined in 2000 and when I went in 2007, I think it was.
I'm not going to test you on the dates, Richard.
Yeah, I've got to remember that now. 2007. Simon had been given speeches about how he wanted an eco park and wanted to find ways to give back. And I think, very early on in the journey, I think before B Corp was even really
Mm.
taking off or a thing, the vision that I could see that Simon had was early for its time. I think there was a lot of questions over, probably what are you on about? It's 2000, 2007. Like there's not a huge amount of this kind of talk going on. But I think really understanding that vision and seeing it through over the last 18 years, it's really been something for me that has evolved and as time has gone on, has become more of a pressing issue that I would say that has become then the business's mission. And,
Mm.
from vision is great because it shows people where you're going to be in a long period of time, but breaking that down into measurable steps has been something that I've taken quite a lot of pride in and a lot of joy in actually saying, okay, well, what does that look like? Where do we go with this? And I think probably midway through my career, one of the things that has really helped with that was that Webmart basically moved cash to an asset, bought this eco asset, which effectively was 164 acres of Scotland, and it was a very overgrown forest with an off-grid lodge, basically. And yeah, it was. I guess that was the eco park that Simon had always aspired to. And at the time, I thought it's odd. Like I guess all I ever know is Webmart, and it's always been a little bit out there with its ideas. But to see someone put cash behind an eco park, which called Grange Wood. It's just south of Edinburgh. It's a lovely slice of the UK, and to see us actually commit to that, I thought, well, this is serious. This is something that the business, as a responsible business, outside of the marketing side of things, for now, this is becoming part of who we are as an identity, and it's something that I think I've not seen any other business really easily sort of take that idea and turn it into fruition. So for me, being able to start seeing that and seeing nature in reality and connecting with it in that way really made me realize at the same time, okay, so we've got to go so much further with the marketing services side because we're responsible now. We're a guardian, a custodian of this eco park, and I think really from that point things started hotting up on well, what does sustainability look for our clients, our supply chain, and over time I would say that we've pretty much conquered working from home. There's still some commuting emissions and things like that. We've conquered scopes 1 and 2 over the last 10 years or so because we got a head start on it. And I think the question that people come to me with is like, what are you doing about scope 3 now? And I would say that we're at the forefront at ice breaking some of the challenges there for digital and physical marketing, data and creative. And I would say, yeah, so it's evolved really, scopes 1 and 2 have always been there of how do we chip away at this and reduce X and Y around the office and the offices that we've got in Yorkshire and Bicester. But really the fundamental mission that came out of this was we're now a responsible business. We're a custodian of a slice of land outside of our offices. We recognise actually we've got almost £20 million worth of turnover that needs to be transitioned into A, measurable carbon footprint, and B, then we need to demonstrably reduce that. And I think
Yeah.
that was the wake up call over the last 10 years, really.
That's such a fascinating sort of journey and story there. Because what I don't know of a single other business that's like, yeah, we bought 160 acres of Scottish land to look after, and that's on our. I can imagine going into the Dragon's Den and saying that's part of the business plan and finding it quite hard to articulate.
The
that
idea at the time.
yeah. But that's such an interesting. It makes so much sense when you put it like that, of like the business owning that, becoming the custodian of that, and that being core to like everything the company does. Like everyone in the company knows about that. Everyone is aware of that, and like a big part of the company then is about enabling that, allowing that to grow and thrive. It's what an that's just such a wonderful idea that I'm sure many people could take away from this already, of like sort of wondering what you can do. Maybe you don't have to buy 160 acres in Scotland, but yeah,
It's all patch of land
yeah,
with,
yeah,
wildflowers or replanting trees. We put
yeah.
ponds up there and things like that. So I think the concept is, there's this current challenge, which I'm sure we'll look back on in 10, 15 years, potentially, James, which is carbon offsetting, which I know is a divisive subject. And I
Yeah.
think, in chatting to a few other business leaders about the tens of thousands that go into carbon offsetting, which,
Mm,
by the way, we do as a business. There is a need to do that. We can't
yeah.
easily capture, we can't remove and reduce as fast as we'd like. And we're not making any direct claims to our regenerative project in Scotland, because people ask, well, why can't you just offset a lot of your carbon there? And I think that's
Mm,
very complex and something that we want to keep separate for now. But I
hmm.
think, looking at the cost of offsetting long term, a lot of business owners do say to me, if I'm paying 5, 10, 15,000 pounds a year, or more, possibly
Mm.
in some businesses it's hundreds of thousands of pounds in reduction of carbon. Is there ways that we could look at, rewilding and owning an ownership of land, not necessarily as an alternative, but it does start waking people up to, what do we do with our profits? What do we do with our cash in the bank?
Yeah.
As Simon says, they're not making any more land these days, so it's a finite resource on the planet. So it's an appreciating asset, but also we're appreciating it as an asset as well, because, like you said, people
Mm.
see it every year. But yeah, so that's the responsible side of business, and that really was an interesting concept, which didn't spur us on to become a B Corp. I think there was always a need to want to push for B Corp from the team, and it took
Mm.
probably 10 years to really make that a reality. I think we probably could have done it sooner, but I think also you have to look at the appetite in the business and the team, and the context and the nuance at the time. But I think, we were very proud to become a B Corp through the pandemic. Actually, we decided to make life a little harder
Right.
for ourselves by
Yeah, it was too easy
focusing on it.
back then to be
Yeah,
a
no,
business.
so easy. We took on some more challenges.
Yeah.
But that really, I would say, solidified our mission. It made us think a little harder about purpose and mission. And we were probably doing a lot of good, and we didn't necessarily realize it was within a framework. And
Mm.
I think we were always coined as B Corp before B Corp. We were always trying to do the right thing. But what's interesting is that, we didn't necessarily accrue any extra points for having our project up in Scotland. And maybe one day that will be recognised. But that really made us think, okay, well, we do need to focus on supply chain. We do need to focus on marketing services. And there was some great ideas in the business. Tom, for example, came forward, one of our aspiring leaders at the time, and said, "Look, I set the team, like, what are we going to be doing during this period, rather than furloughing everyone? Like, what ideas we're gonna need in the next 3 to 5 years? What can we focus on? What can we R&D during this time?" And I think the team probably thought I was just, finding ways to keep them occupied during the time where no one really had the answers. But actually, it gave a great opportunity for fresh thinking and some long-term ambitions to be worked on. And that's kind of
Right.
really where we started talking about EcoSend and, effectively, some of the services that Webmart have been working on to
Mm.
measure, reduce, offset, and communicate better around marketing sustainability. So that's kind of where we've been over the last kind of 3 or 4 years, really, counting carbon.
Right. Yeah, no, that's it's just fascinating hearing about all of that context to where you are today. And so I guess when in the lockdown, when you were starting to sort of think about this, was there basically within the team a sort of a discussion of like, okay, we have our 160 acres of rewilding going on, but there was our day to day, what we are doing for our clients, how we're helping them with their marketing. Where do we even begin on like what's the impact of this? How do we measure this? What is going on here? Was that sort of the starting point of those discussions?
It was. I think listening to the team and then also looking around at what was going on, and this is still a truth, right? Fundamentally, no one seems to really have gathered that marketing sustainability or sustainability and counting carbon and reducing it within marketing is even an issue. This is where I was sitting on webinars and thinking, wow, we're reducing, measuring how many lorries we use and reducing the amount of flights that we're taking. And isn't this great for the environment because everyone's at their house? And obviously there's fundamentally huge isures with just locking people up, but that's a whole different podcast.
We'll cover that on another one.
Stay out of that one. But I would say, looking around at what people were trying to do at the time, people started thinking long-term, bigger picture. And it was fascinating, those early conversations. And I joined a few sort of regular webinars with different cohorts of people thinking about ideas. And I realized that no one's really understood that there's going to be a cost to the planet from marketing, or at least it was very hard to find any research to back this or anything like that. That's where I started joining the dots between what the team was saying in terms of, well, how do we break down measuring our carbon footprint? How do we achieve a better BCorp score? How do we find ways to get ahead of sustainability as a business? And now we've conquered scopes 1 and 2, and fundamentally when your offices are closed you start focusing on other things, right? So then the team are saying, well, what can we do about scope 3? So that's obviously all our products and services, and I kind of realized, well, we've got at the time 15 to now 18 million pounds worth of turnover and growing, and that will have a tonnage to it, right? And that's something that then you start going, okay, well then how do you measure that? And is there any tools to measure it? Then okay, there's no tools available to measure it. Okay, so how are we going to start measuring? And that's where we start saying, okay, we need to do some R&D and invest in building some digital and physical calculators for our own footprint. But then also, is there anything we can do to further the thinking on, climate action in terms of the industry, in terms of waking people up to emissions? And listen, I can say this because I've seen loads of statistics, and if no one has a calculator, I don't understand how you can accurately estimate this, but we're going to go with it, which is that digital footprints globally, I'm sure you've come across this stat, are somewhat estimated somewhere in the region of 3 to 5% globally and growing, which when you're trying to reduce flights and you hear the stat of flights being, around 3-ish%, I think they're the numbers that people are claiming. I don't know if you've come across those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've seen about 4% was the number I had in my head there. For that.
So you're looking at, somewhere between my 3 and 5, we'll spare the change at 4.
I mean, pretty much bang on between 3 and 5, right?
But no one's been able to really give us like an accurate estimate, and we know that things are increasing, and there's all sorts of issues that I started coming across when I did my research of like dark data and 85% of data being just left and not accessed and not cleansed and not, and I was thinking, well, we come from, our heritage as a business was in 1996, it was a print brokerage with technology, like a bit like lastminute.com for finding sources for printing. So then you get used to the manufacturing mindset. And what I find fascinating is going into digital in its maturity is like, when you understand manufacturing, you can measure every step and you can make efficiency at every step because it's better for costs, it's better for energy and now sustainability. And then you look at digital and touch points and data and weight of websites and weight of images, and you start thinking about it with that manufacturing mindset. And there's something, we did training, lean Six Sigma training, and you apply that to digital and you start looking at it and going, well, hold on a minute, actually everything here has a carbon footprint, a weighting to it. There's an efficiency rating to this. There's a problem with bloat and the energy and the carbon load that puts and the load that puts on the grid. And you start joining these thinking up with like our mission as a business. You join the thinking up and you start thinking, okay, well, no one seems to be accurately calculating our footprint within digital as well as print and physical marketing, event materials. But it's that highly visible thing of like, okay, well, is it paper straws and plastic straws? That whole argument of like, well, it's visible, so therefore I feel like I'm doing something meaningful for the planet. But you get a lot of stick in the print marketplace for sustainability. And then when we're venturing into digital, and it's kind of like, okay, this feels weird that no one's holding us accountable for our footprint and the wastage on a campaign. And what about concepts like how do you dormant a campaign when you finish with it rather than recycle it? You can't recycle digital easily, so let's dormant it. So I think that's kind of where our thinking started getting really, lots of days locked up trying to figure out where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years and committing to it really and sticking with that roadmap.
It's super, super interesting. I feel like so much of what you're saying there, Richard, like kind of tallies with our own. I mean, we were, I guess, just out of the pandemic when we were talking about the early days of EcoSend, but we were quite surprised once you start seeing some of those numbers, like that 4%, as you were saying, like, and how that relates to the airline industry, the waste industry, things like this, and you're like, that can that be right? Can that be right? And the more you dig into it, the more you realize, like, it's really easy to just think that all of our digital lives have no consequence from a climate perspective because it's clean, there's no smoke coming out of my computer on a good day. And
like the cloud or disingenuous at
I was just about to say that. The cloud is this lovely fluffy thing that's all soft, and it's actually huge ugly warehouse buildings filled with computers that are running 24/7. And there's so much of that that knowledge and awareness of that, even within the tech and marketing industries, even within, let alone just consumers who are totally outside of it, is I think still woefully small. But thankfully people like yourselves are working on ways of drawing more attention to this and addressing it. So I guess I'm curious, that kind of naturally tees us up into, how are you addressing some of this, Richard? Like, what are you and the team doing? What have you figured out so far? And I don't expect you to have all the answers, but
compressing that into a podcast, we'll do our absolute best. So, so the fundamental question was, does marketing have a footprint? And the answer is yes. And then we've been on that voyage of discovery to work with a few climate-related agencies that have helped us use greenhouse gas emission factors and mapping that to our marketing knowledge in terms of the granular detail behind a digital or a print campaign. And then we've been able to look at it and go, okay, so there's energy, there's gigabytes being transferred, there's a formula here in terms of adding that with our greenhouse gas emission factors and coming up with some, at this stage, estimated as accurate as you possibly can to the best guidance that we can get through ISO and PAS standards, which, I'll be honest, there isn't a universal standard to work to. So we've had to, build this as we go. And being early, I won't say first, but certainly being early on that journey compared to some, you're having to answer some pretty big questions solo, and dig and find research papers and read up on that and bring that together to create that measurement piece. So we've been able to now create, we call it Ecometrics, which is our measurement tool internally that we are using primarily to work on Webmart's scope of emissions, and then obviously working with other partners to help open source the thinking to help others reach similar calculations. But basically, that enables us to measure the footprint of it, whether it's an email campaign, a website, or a printed production, right the way through from material through to doorstep and distribution to address. And that gives us a very granular, more than most calculators we've seen, a really granular estimate of what the carbon footprint would be. And in our framework that we've created, which is measure and then it's reduce, so we don't know how much we're reducing by. You don't say it's more green or less green, or it's more efficient or less efficient. You need to be able to prove that, right? So just like budget, you'd know the difference between £50,000 and £40,000. We need the same thing for carbon. So now, having that calculation, we can say the greatest factor that impacts a website or an email campaign or a page is maybe image use or high-res images or autoplay videos or whatever that ends up being. And that bloat, we can easily target and say, A, it's bloated, therefore it is creating the largest percentage of footprint. Also, we can look at the analytics of how many views that pages are getting. That exponentially, modifies that carbon calculation up if you're getting hundreds of thousands or millions of hits to certain pages. We can look at the waste in terms of maybe the data that's used for the email campaigns or the printed campaigns to make those reductions before we create anything. That's the most important part. That optimization really helps us then reduce, and that enables us to say specifically we did this and it reduced by X% or this value of carbon. If we can't reduce it any further, then we're currently using gold verified standard offsets, and we change those every year when we complete schemes, and they're picked by the team based on climate justice, basically going for third world carbon offsets so that we can give back to the most disproportionately disadvantaged by the climate change that we as first world countries have created. And then the last bit, the biggest thing that we can do is communicate. That's the last part of the framework, point 4. And communicate means that we are putting a logo with the carbon footprint, a bit like calorie counting, on each of the campaigns or websites that we do, so that we can help demonstrate that even if people don't understand carbon footprints at this stage, they'll go, oh, that's interesting. I've not seen that before. And it's the fact that the brand has consciously thought about that calorie count, that carbon count, that's really important. And had this conversation just before coming on this podcast with some people around, a bit like the train line. I don't know if you book trains with the train line, but maybe 3 or 4 years ago, you wouldn't maybe have even thought about it too much. But now starting to see the carbon for the trip, your carbon efficiency profile, it starts getting you thinking about it, and it normalizes it a bit like when you're in a restaurant picking food and you go, oh my God, that one's another 400 calories for cheese. Period. So I think that's kind of where we've got to now, is that communication piece is both doing things like this, the podcast, showing people that they can start addressing emissions in marketing, and getting marketing to take ownership for its share. Every other department is now stepping up to that challenge in logistics or operations or wherever it is in a business. And marketing is that first touch point to create a sale. We worry about recycling way after the sale, but we're in the business, the industry of generating need, and also we're at the path to purchase. So we really need to start taking responsibility for that slice. So that's where that communication piece comes in. Climate action, as well as also enabling brands to really own their footprint and say that they're doing something about it.
That's so fascinating, Richard. I think the communicate piece is really, and I really love that you've got that as like that final step. I mean, one of the last things we spoke about was a round table about greenwashing and green hushing, and and the number of brands who are afraid to even speak about climate, and so much of it is about that conversation and people having the confidence to just talk and raise some of these points. So the more brands talking about this and communicating what they are doing, I think is just like fundamentally a much better place for us to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, I think measurement means you've got integrity, and then you can make verifiable claims. And I think the big problem when we discussed on our last roundtable around green hushing and greenwashing is that confidence, so that someone, if they peel back and have a look at what's going on behind the scenes, that you can actually verifiably give a carbon footprint that's got a lot of integrity behind it. And secondly, you're trying to influence consumer behaviour. As an agency, of course, we've got £20 million footprint we need to tackle, but the ripple effects thereafter from our scope 3 is end consumers interacting with marketing. And when you pick up bottles and you see BCorp and you see recycled and you see various claims that are on there, and you start seeing a carbon footprint as well as a calorie count and sugar content and stuff like that. I think that's the vision that I want to see come alive over the next 20 years, is that we start seeing the marketing industry start, calculating and representing that, because I think it will help brands demonstrate that they're ethically thinking about their marketing, but also they are influencing consumer behaviors with their touch points,
Absolutely.
not just on their packaging, but also with their marketing emails, website, and also their printed collateral as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The impact as the impact marketing professionals have, I think, is not to be underplayed. It's such a huge impact that people can have on actual consumer behavior beyond the purchase of their own product. The normalizing of talking about some of these topics is huge. I feel like you're already talking a bit about the future, Richard, but I know we could talk all day. I would love to talk all day. I feel like we're already at half an hour for the podcast, so it's just flown by. But I'm guessing you have quite an optimistic sense of what the future will hold. But what do you think things are going to look like in the next few years, maybe 5 years time?
Yeah, I think we need certain people to remain optimistic in the face of adversity. Otherwise, it's just very dark and depressing if you read the news, and certainly the news is incentivized to find damage and various other things to draw you in. So I'm an optimist, and I staunchly believe that we will all find solutions to contribute towards a better planet. And I think that you have to accept that you're not going to get 100% of people behind that. And I think that that's quite an important thing to remember when you're tackling these big challenges. I really am optimistic the further I've got into this, that there are other people out there that are trying to tackle this. And I think the community that I've found through this, through meeting other agencies, talking about shared issues, it's a space that you're competing to overcome, but it's non-competing in terms of you all want the same thing. So it's quite a nice space to be. Certainly I've seen it in the BCorp community, where you open source, business ideas in terms of making a business more responsible and better for the planet, for the future. But I think of the people that I've come across that are really trying, agencies for me remain at the forefront of trying to solve this for brands and clients. I would love to see more brands getting behind this, because I see so many brands, and I call them out and say what an amazing job they're doing when they are pushing, whether it's like in our roundtable, carbon negative beer, or whether it's, a variety of different consumer products that you see out there, or services. Like I've mentioned, Trainline, we should shout about the best practice, and it is fantastic to see it. Even if the whole solution isn't in place, it's amazing to see that. And I think if you add that together, you start to see a bit more of a movement of brands getting behind it. I would love to see more brands getting behind using EcoSend, and also services such as what Webmart does, because I really think it will enable them to tell a better story to their customers and influence more people to see the change that we need to see over the next 3 to 5 years, because things get serious beyond then. So I'm optimistic, but not underestimating the significance of the challenge that we've got to get around as many people as possible.
That is a very balanced and all in all very positive way to think about the future, Richard. I think we could all take something from that. Thank you. We're pretty much the end. The only other thing I'm going to ask is any advice you have for other people. And I know you did want to share some wise words of wisdom. If you haven't already, you've already shared so much wisdom on this podcast, Richard. So we'll steal one more point from you, and then we'll let you get on your way.
Thank you. I'll do my absolute best to impart as much knowledge as I can. So I would say that marketing obsesses over measurement, metrics, data, analysis, but really is shying away from owning the same approach that's needed to integrate sustainability into the everyday life of marketing as a department. And I think that, there's a quote that I can share with you guys, which is, not everything that matters can be measured, and not everything that we can measure matters, which means if we get it right and measure what matters, we can actually move the dial. And rather than doing the stereotypical thing in marketing, which is moving on to the next shiny thing before we've conquered the basics, The counter to my optimistic view is the fact that we are all embracing the next shiny thing, which is AI. And, after the recession of the last year, it's been really tough in the marketing space. We nearly started on our journey at pace on sustainability. And I think that we have moved already onto generating higher carbon footprints using generative AI before we've even thought about the impact of it. So I think, yes, there's constant distractions. My advice would be to try and focus on that long term, continually trying to build on that sustainability, small steps over a long period of time. Don't let it go. It's a bit like my charity challenge that I'm doing on Saturday. You have to break down the training into small steps and not, if you get distracted or deviated, you come back to it, because it's going to be so much harder to achieve that goal when you get there at that weekend that you need to do it, if you've let go that training over a long period of time.
And for those who don't know, Richard was it 24 miles of hiking you're doing at the weekend?
Yes, this weekend, 24 miles over 12 hours in the Yorkshire Three Peaks for a charity close to my heart. Yeah.
My goodness. I don't know how you're going to do that, Richard, but I know you will, because I just know you will. We'll also make sure, I know you will have done it by the time this goes out, but we'll put a link to donate in the show notes, just because I think yeah, it's just wonderful what you're doing there. So Richard, thank you so much. Honestly, this has been a show absolutely packed with inspiration, information, practical guidance, so many wonderful things. I'm sure many people will want to follow you, learn more about what you're up to, so they can go to Webmart's website, webmartuk.com, and find you on LinkedIn, Richard Boon on LinkedIn, and we'll put both those in the show notes. So Richard, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
James, great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks. And thank you everyone for watching, listening. We love bringing you shows like this and hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, please do tell everyone you know. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.